All right, moving through game week, getting closer to Pitt's week 2 showdown with Central Michigan. The Chippewas coming to Acrisure Stadium, not Arcashore, Acrisure Stadium on Saturday for a noon kickoff. Pitt will take on Central Michigan, looking to get to 2-0. Of course, Central Michigan's also 1-0 after winning at San Jose State over the weekend. And we've talked a lot so far already this week, yesterday and on Monday, about some of the big topics facing Pitt this week, some of the big question marks and all of that. But I got 4 or 5, depending on how you slice it, big questions I think the team needs to answer this week, or maybe they're the biggest questions I'm going to be watching for this week, the things I want to see the most or I'm most interested in keeping an eye on in the Pitt Central Michigan game on Saturday. So let's do that today. What are the biggest questions facing Pitt heading into this week 2 matchup, particularly with the backyard brawl looming on the other side of this one? This is a big game. It's not as big as the other 10 games that are coming after it, but this game this week I think is a big one because it's really the last sort of preparation step to get ready for those big power conference showdowns, West Virginia, the ACC, and Notre Dame after that. So what are the biggest things we're watching for? What are the biggest questions we're asking this week and looking for out of Pitt's game against Central Michigan? Let's talk about that here on the Wednesday edition of the Morning Pitt, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Yeah, it's Wednesday here on the Morning Pitt and getting closer to game day. I tell you, we're still early enough in the season. I mean, I'm excited about this. I'm looking forward to seeing Pitt play on Saturday, seeing what they're able to do against Central Michigan, kind of how they improve from the Duquesne game, what else they sort of roll out there. If we assume that they held things back, do they put a little bit more out there? Do they use a little bit more of the offense? Do they use a little bit more of the defense? Are they more effective? What do they get cleaned up and what do they improve at? And none of those things, at least not in those terms, are any of the big questions we're going to be asking today. But I am interested to see how they come out in week 2, how they do, particularly in certain areas that, I would say probably on both sides of the ball. I've got a couple on each side of the ball that I'm really interested in watching, and I think you probably are too, because we've already touched on it a little bit. I mean, like, some of these things are some of the biggest topics. The quarterback, the run, the running game in particular. I think those two are probably the place that we'll start here as we look at the biggest questions for Pitt in this Central Michigan game. And I'll start with Eli Holstein. And we've talked about this in a few different terms and talked about this in a few different ways. So far this week already. 15 of 23, 215 yards, 4 touchdowns, 1 interception, plus 7 rushing attempts for 41 yards. I think he had 47 gained yards, and then, of course, he had the 1 sack for -6. So, I mean, 6 rushing attempts, not counting the sack, 6 rushing attempts for 47 yards. That's all part of Eli Holstein's game, and it was all going pretty well. You know what I mean? Like, 4 touchdown passes in a game. No Pitt quarterback has done that since Kenny Pickett in 2021, the regular season finale in 2021. So, yes, it's admittedly a low bar to clear what Keaton Slovis, Phil Dracovic, Christian Veyer, and Nate Yarnell were able to do, let alone Holstein himself last season, but it's notable. And it's remarkable. And yeah, it doesn't matter, to me, it doesn't matter the fact that it happened against an FCS opponent, because Slovis played against FCS opponents, and, Dracovic played against an FCS opponent, I think, right? Yeah, he played Wofford that year. And then obviously Holstein last year had, whoever they had, Youngstown State. But either way, I think with Eli Holstein, it's, something we've talked about kind of since the postgame show on Saturday night. That, like, I think when you take the broad view, you say 15 of 23, 215, 4 touchdowns, and 1 interception. That's a pretty good day. But when we drill down at it and look sort of like play by play, 2nd and 9 on Pitt's first possession, he tries to throw to Raphael Williams on an outbreaking pattern, and it's almost intercepted. A pass that we saw him make multiple times last year and either get picked off or almost get picked off. And the worst thing about those outbreaking patterns is when they get picked off, they often lead to a touchdown for the other team. And that's what he throws on his first pass. His second pass, so that was 2nd and 9, throws that one incomplete. Fortunate that Duquesne didn't intercept it. Third, they come out for 3rd and 9. Duquesne's only got 10 defenders on the field. And Pitt, despite their interest and emphasis on running a tempo offense, now they don't go tempo after an incomplete pass, understandably, but Duquesne's only got 10 guys out there. Pitt waits around long enough to allow Duquesne to call a timeout there. That's a miscalculation. I mean, Cade Bell should have recognized it. Somebody should have recognized it and said, get the play in, snap the ball. You've got an advantage here with 11 on 10. But instead, Duquesne calls a timeout. Pitt has 3rd and 9, and he throws a little swing pass to Desmond Reed that gets 2 yards. They punt. Next drive, 2nd and 9 again. Eli Holstein throws a pass to Kenny Johnson. It picks up 18 yards. I never really saw a good replay of it. I know that it looked close enough to an incomplete pass that Pitt rushed up to the line of scrimmage to try to run the play quickly. I don't think they were just trying to run tempo. I think they were trying to run the play quickly before Duquesne could challenge that pass. And they ended up getting a false start as a result. They weren't really like in rhythm there. So he hit Kenny Johnson, but hits him in a way that was close enough to being an incomplete pass that everybody was a little bit concerned about it. So not a great throw there. And then, he kind of gets it together after that. He ran for 16 yards. It looked like a little read play on 4th and 1. He hits Blue Hicks for a nice 13-yard pass. And then he gets inside the 5. He's at the 2-yard line. He rolls to his right to throw. Oh, well, actually, before that, he had a pass to Kenny Johnson in the end zone that I think was sort of scripted. That he was going to throw it to Kenny Johnson before the ball was even snapped. He knew that pass was going to Kenny Johnson. It ends up being incomplete, even though he had other open receivers. I think it was a 3rd and goal. He rolls and throws to Kenny Johnson. Ends up losing 3 yards on it. He finally gets Blue Hicks for a touchdown, which was a good play. You get into the 3rd drive, his first pass of the 3rd drive. He overthrows Kenny Johnson, throws it too high, and then they get down near they had really good field position. They started at the 26. They get a couple plays to get inside the 20. They're at 4th and 3 at the 19, and that's when he throws the interception, which Eli Holstein said after the game he felt like Desmond Reed was covered out in the flat that the linebacker got out there. Pat Narduzzi said on Monday that wasn't the case. He didn't say Eli was wrong. He just said Desmond Reed was open, and if he throws it to him, it's probably a touchdown. Instead, he tries to throw it to the end zone, and by his own admission, never saw the safety. I mean, that's a mistake. Like, you have to see the field better than that. Whether you're playing Duquesne or whoever you want to count as the top team in the country, like the sort of polar opposite, you can't miss the safety like that. Pitt's 4th drive, he ends up with a pass tipped at the line of scrimmage, and then on 3rd and 7 throws to Jake Overman for 3 yards. Pitt's 5th drive, he gets a pass interference call that helps him. He doesn't have his timing down on a fade pattern to Deuce Spann, but Juelz Goff finishes the drive. And then finally on the 6th drive, which was at Pitt's final, it was the next to last drive of the first half, he gets into a little bit of rhythm. He gets, Kenny Johnson for 12 yards. Deuce Spann has a nice catch and run for 15 yards. And then he, has that sort of what I've been calling sort of a vintage Eli Holstein play where he steps up to the line of scrimmage, he steps up in the pocket and sort of off script makes sort of an off script pass to Kenny Johnson at the goal line for the touchdown. And then they close the first half with, pretty nice drive, including Holstein scrambling for 16 yards again. He gets the big catch and run from Poppy Williams for 45 yards and closes it out with the Blue Hicks, the one-handed catch, which was an incredible catch by Blue Hicks, but also a perfect throw by Holstein. So by the end of the first half, he's rolling. You know what I mean? By the end of the first half, he's doing well, and he didn't really. The second half, he only played a little bit, didn't do a whole lot in the second half, but he gets Malachi Thomas for that touchdown pass. Thomas runs down the sideline, and that ends Holstein's day. So what you have is kind of sputtering play. Fits and starts, a little bit of promising, but then obviously some, misread on the interception, misread on a few of the plays near the end zone, and just generally not very smooth. Again, rusty, right? Rusty. And so this is what I've said all week is, okay, I'm willing to accept that you're a little rusty when you haven't played in that long, but now that rust needs to be off. And for me to truly accept that you were just a little rusty to start this game against Duquesne, you need to come out and not be rusty against Central Michigan. Maybe the first drive or two where you're trying to figure out what the Chippewas are doing on defense. Okay, it might take you a little bit of time. Maybe you just need to get a read on it, and that's okay. but it needs to come together a lot more quickly than it did in the Duquesne game because, again, this is your last warm-up. Whatever you might want to think about West Virginia, they're a power conference opponent. This is your last warm-up game. And, obviously the team can't think of this as a warm-up game. They need to take Central Michigan seriously and, approach every opponent equally and all of that. But this is one you should come out firing. Like, you should look much better against Central Michigan than you looked against Duquesne and consistently start to finish. You still should be in a position where you can come out at, midway through or at the end of the third quarter and let Cole Gonzalez come out and get some time at the end of, to finish the game. But you need to look much better. Consistently start to finish. Ditto for the run blocking. And I think we talked yesterday about the run blocking and kind of, how it broke down and, how the running backs averaged 6.2 yards per carry, but really, they had 3 really big runs and the other 15 runs, they averaged 2.3 yards per carry. It needs to be a consistent effort and consistent performance from the offensive line, from the run schemes, from the play calling, whatever it is that you feel like you need to do, whether it's attacking the perimeter more with more stretch runs and tosses and pitches, which they did a couple of, but not a lot with Desmond Reed, whether it's mixing and matching Reed and Juelz Goff more, maybe even using those guys together, which I think if that's something they are going to do, they might not do it until the West Virginia game. I don't know if that's in the books, but I would like to see it. I would like to see 3 receivers and 2 running backs, or 2 receivers, a tight end, and 2 running backs. I mean, I can't remember many times when they only had 2 receivers on the field in sort of their normal offense in the middle of the field, not down the goal line or something like down near the goal line or something like that. But maybe even 2 backs on the field. So you can have that versatility of attacking the perimeter with Reed and maybe between the tackles with Goff. I mean, Reed really only had about 3 carries, according to Pro Football Focus. Reed only had 3 carries in between the tackles, and those 3 carries gained a net total of 0 yards. 1 carry gained 1 yard, 1 carry gained 1 yard, 1 carry lost 2. So, Desmond Reed only had about 2 or 3 really productive carries anyway, so most of his work was unproductive, I guess. But Juelz Goff mostly went, he had a couple of carries that went outside, but 4 out of his 7 carries were between the tackles, and he gained 15 yards on those 4 carries. So not great. You'd like to be over 4 yards per carry, but solid running. So maybe if you even put both of those guys on the field together, you could have. It's not thunder and lightning because I don't think Juelz Goff is big enough to be thunder, but a little bit more diversity and versatility in your attack and how you can attack and different kinds of threats. If you've got both of those guys on the field, it gives you more options there of things that you can do. And so, I'd like to see them expand what they try to do. I'd like to see them run more with the running backs than they did. They ended up with 18 rushing attempts for the running backs. I think they need more than that, particularly in a game like Central Michigan. I think, Reed had 8 carries. Juelz Goff had 7. I'd like to see a little bit more for both of those guys, a little bit more mixing and matching, and a little bit more versatility in the way they attack with the run game. Most of all, I want to see more push up front out of the offensive line. All right, flipping over to the defense, the thing I'd really like to see, and this may or may not be the game that's actually going to allow it, but one thing I'd like to see is some more stats from the defensive line. Now, I just went back and was looking, and actually the D-line against Duquesne had about 4.5 tackles for loss and 1 sack. That's not bad, actually. That's better than I would have thought. I felt like the defensive line was getting a good push up front. They obviously did a good job defending the run and got after the quarterback pretty well. And they ended up producing more stats than I thought. But I would like to see them be even more productive. Now, Central Michigan may or may not be a game where the defensive line can put up a lot of stats. San Jose State had 3 tackles for loss and no sacks. But, you're probably not going to get many sacks when you don't pass the ball very often, which was the case with Central Michigan. Now, San Jose State, I think at one point they led 14-13 or 14-10 or something like that. And so it was a close game throughout. I think the final score was 16-14 or something. And so it was a close game throughout. So it's not like Central Michigan was forced to drop back and pass. They could play the game they wanted to play, which is a run-heavy game. If Pitt's able to build a bigger lead, maybe they can force Central Michigan to have to throw more, in which case maybe more of those opportunities will present themselves for the defensive line. But I'd just like to see a little more production out of the defensive line. San Jose State, like I say, had 3 tackles for loss. I think 2 were from linebackers. 1 was from a D lineman. I don't know if he's an end or a tackle, but only one tackle for loss up front. I'd like to see Pitt's defensive line get another 4 or 5 tackles for loss, and maybe if you can force Central Michigan into a passing situation or force them into having to pass, maybe you can get a couple sacks out of that as well. I'd just like to see that defensive line continue to assert themselves. I felt pretty good about how they played against Duquesne. I came out of that thinking, okay, they look like they've got a chance. Now, as the competition keeps increasing, I'd like to see them keep stepping their level of play up as well. Behind them at linebacker and safety, probably the biggest thing I'm looking for out of this game for the linebackers and the safeties is rotation. I was really surprised how little rotation we saw out of not necessarily the back 7, because the corners did rotate a decent amount. I mean, Rashad Battle, Tamon Lynham, Shadarian Harrison all split reps. Sean Lee eventually came in there and got in the mix as well. But linebacker and safety, and I understand the depth. There's the dogs. I understand the depth at linebacker took a major hit with the injuries to Jeremiah Marcelin and Jaden Bonsu. And I knew that was going to cut down the rotation, but I still think you probably could have and likely should have seen more of Cam Lindsey and Nick Lappy earlier in the game, because you're going to need those guys. I mean, you're in a tough position now. Lewis, Biles, and Lovelace are all going to play more than you were expecting or hoping they would. Throughout the season. They're going to get less rest than you were probably hoping to get for them. But you're still going to need Cam Lindsey and Nick Lappy out there. And to not get them more work, I think Lappy had 16 snaps and Lindsey had 12 defensive snaps. I know Pat Narduzzi mentioned that Nick Lappy paid 25 special team snaps or whatever. And that's great, but he needs to be in the defense. He needs to be working in the defense. He needs to be making those calls. He needs to be doing that recognition and communication with the rest of the back 7 and the D-line and everything like that. To not get Lappy more than 16 snaps, to not get Cam Lindsey, a redshirt freshman who's just played a handful of snaps last year, to not get him more than a dozen snaps against Duquesne, I think is a missed opportunity, really, on a lot of levels. I mean, a missed opportunity to rest Kyle Lewis and Rasheem Biles more, a missed opportunity to get Cam Lindsey valuable experience and time on the field. This game, I think it's got to happen today, this week on Saturday. I think you've got to get those guys out there. And then safety was the same thing. I was shocked that Cruz Brookins and Javon McIntyre basically never came off the field until like midway late in the third quarter, when Josh Garrier finally got in with the defense. Like, I don't know why you wouldn't be rotating the safeties. Maybe not as much as you rotated last year with McIntyre and Donovan McMillan and P.J. O'Brien, and then Brookins is the 4th guy. Maybe you don't rotate quite as much as you did a year ago, but to play those guys every single snap against Duquesne, again, I think it's a missed opportunity. I think it's a missed opportunity to get valuable snaps for Josh Garrier, who you're going to need this season. It's a missed opportunity to get valuable snaps for Kavir Baines-Marquez, although he played in the Delta, the defensive sub package on 3rd down, so he at least got some work. But I mean, it's a missed opportunity to get valuable snaps for Garrier, for Baines-Marquez, and Allen Bryant too. You're going to need those guys. They're going to play for you on defense this season, regardless of whether or not Javon McIntyre and Cruz Brookins stay healthy. Even if those guys don't get hurt, you're going to still sub for them every now and then. You're going to rotate at safety. And that's what the Duquesne game was for, is getting those guys work. And I feel like that was a missed opportunity. This game, I'm interested to see what kind of rotations they use if they rotate more than they did against Duquesne, and if they're able to get those guys, those younger guys, those inexperienced players on the field for more valuable experience. I like this Central Michigan game. It's not just a blow-off game. It's not an easy, I don't want to say easy, but an automatic win like an FCS opponent. But this is a game Pitt should win and win comfortably. Use the opportunity that's there for you. Use the opportunity to get some of those younger guys on the field, because you're going to need them this year. Because I'm not talking about oh, why didn't they get their third team offensive line more reps? It's not like that. I'm talking about guys that you know you're going to need. There's a world where maybe you only need 6 or 7 offensive linemen all season. There's a world where maybe you don't need more than a handful of reps out of your backup quarterback. There's a world where you don't have to go deeper than you're too deep, your top 6 wide receivers. There's a world where, all these things, but like, there's not a world where you're going to get through every game with only 3 linebackers and 2 safeties playing. Like, that world doesn't exist. And so you're going to need those players to get as much valuable work as they can, so they're not walking out there against West Virginia with 24 snaps under their belt, which right now that's the pace Cam Lindsey's on. He's got to play more this week. Nick Lappy has to play more this week. Josh Garrier has to play more this week. Allen Bryant, Kavir Baines-Marquez in the base defense has to play more this week, I think. But we'll see. Like I say, that's why this is one of the biggest questions is, do those guys end up playing more this week? We'll find out. Look, we got a lot to talk about on tonight's live show. Don't forget, 8:30 p.m. right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Make sure you tune in for that. It'll be a lot of fun. Me and Jim and you will talk about the Duquesne game. We'll talk about Central Michigan. We'll talk about the ACC. We'll talk about everything going on in the world of college sports, and particularly Pitt football as the Panthers get ready for week 2. So tune in tonight right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Make sure you like this video and subscribe, and that way you won't miss any of our Pitt video content. And I think that's about it. Thanks for tuning in today. Hope your week is going well so far. We made it to the midpoint of the week, folks. Just a couple more days till Pitt football game day. We'll see you tonight on the live show, and we'll talk to you tomorrow on the Morning Pitt right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.